So Allison and I had been married for about 7 years, and we decided we already had Cade and we wanted to have another one. So we're like, hey, let's give it a go. And we tried for about a year, and then a year later, from trying, Maddex was conceived. She was pregnant, and we were really kind of believing for a girl, but God had other plans.
So everything was going really good, and then I went in for his 6-month anatomy scan, and my doctor came back in and said that they had found a cyst on his brain. At that time, of course, that news was a little alarming. They said that it could go away. If it persisted, that it would cause severe birth defects. That would be unknown until he arrived. So we went back. They said they'd know within 2 more months. So by 8 months along, they would know if he was going to be born with it or if it would go away.
So we went home, and she was crying. I was emotional, and we just decided, let's believe God. Like, terminating pregnancy was never an option.
Never an option.
But I was like, let's believe that our kid is going to be healed. And so we just started praying, and we started declaring and believing that tumor was gone. And I just remember her calling it out, like, it's gone in the name of Jesus. Like, Mama Bear got mad.
I did.
In prayer. And so
I knew that we had come too far, and that was never God's intent. It was not in his plan, and that he was going to be born healthy and whole. And so when we went back in at that 8-month checkup.
So they could tell us how bad it was.
Yeah, what exactly we were bracing for. The scan came back 100% clean. There was absolutely zero sign of that tumor. It had completely dried up and dissolved and completely disappeared from his little body.
Yeah, it was totally
Which was
gone.
amazing.
I think Maddex was your hardest labor, wasn't he?
Yes, he was 21 hours. He was face up, and everything about that child was hard.
So we were in the hospital for 20 hours before you started pushing, where she was walking, doing stuff, and so then Maddex finally decided to arrive, and so doctor and one nurse comes in, and it's just the two of them, and Maddex came very suddenly, so like they just barely got there, and they start pushing, and nobody else is coming in the room. And we keep hitting the nurse's button, and I find out
hitting the nurse's button.
I kept hitting the nurse's button because I was freaking out because there's only 2 people and they keep telling me to do stuff, and I didn't know what to do. And so it turns out the nurse button was broke, and no one was coming. So I was very involved in the delivery of my child.
Maddex, yeah.
But I remember the midwife getting very specific with Allison. Her demeanor changed while she was pushing, and she got serious, and she's like, you need to do this now. And so I saw Allison, and she was pushing, and then all of a sudden I saw why. Maddex came out, and the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck, and he was very blue. And Allison did what she told her to do. She pushed, Maddex came out, they got the umbilical cord unwrapped, and seemingly everything was pretty good.
We had a really good, healthy 7-pound baby with no tumor.
So we got to spend a little bit of time with Maddex, and Cade got to meet him, and we spent a couple hours. And then Allison, of course, fed him, and then they took him to the nursery for the evening. I think it was probably about 2 a.m. was the last time we saw him. And then at 7 a.m., the doctor woke her up.
Yeah, I woke up to a doctor tugging on my toe at the end of the bed, trying to get me awake. And I remember feeling really groggy and kind of rubbing my eyes and getting my bearings. And at that point, he told me that they had found some things with Maddex's heart, and they weren't real sure what was going on. And so they were running tests. And as soon as he was there, he was gone. And I remember sitting in that bed, this kind of coming to my senses.
We didn't even know what it meant.
Like, what is going on? What's happening?
So this is the 3rd attack on Maddex. So about 9 a.m. they finally come in. We're asking people what's going on, and they tell us
where my baby is.
Yeah, where's my son?
Why haven't I seen him?
And they tell us that he needs to immediately be air vac'd to a higher care facility because he has a leaky valve in his heart, and that if he doesn't have surgery, he's going to die within hours to 2 days, is what they were telling us. And so, I don't know. I don't think that there's anything I can do that prepares you for a moment
words.
like that. So I mean, here she is, not even 12 hours after delivering a baby, and we're getting dressed, and her parents come right away, and they get Maddex, say, packaged up. The amount of stuff that they put you in to airlift you, they were airlifting them about, I think
64 miles.
64 miles away. And I would like to tell you I don't know how, but I actually drove to the hospital and beat the helicopter there. So I don't know how fast I was going, but if you want to do the math, I got there very fast. I beat the helicopter to the hospital, waiting for them to get Maddex. They get them, and then they start checking them out. After a couple hours, finally a doctor comes out to me, and he starts talking to me about Maddex's heart and all the things that he's seeing through his echo. And he keeps using a lot of terms that I don't know and that I don't understand. And I just look at him and I said, is my son going to live? Is he going to die? What is going on? And he just kind of looked at me a little puzzled, and he's like, well, he's not going to die, but he does need surgery. And so they showed us where the leaks were. And from one hospital to the next hospital, you can see how much it was leaking before and how much it was leaking less when he got to the other hospital. So just in an hour to 2 hour span, God was already starting to heal Maddex's heart valve. So finally they tell us that they want him to have surgery, but let's just see if we can get him to be a month old. And so after a week in the hospital, we get to take him home. And then 3 weeks later, we take him in for his checkup. And in a month, they say, you know what, he's doing okay. So let's just go to 3 months. And then in 3 months, they look at him again and they say, you know what, let's just see if we can get him a little older. And so then 6 months and the same thing. Finally, at 9 months, they're not saying a lot to us. So the 9-month checkup, it was a little bit different.
Yeah, so by now we had really gotten used to these. They would always do an EKG followed up by an echo. And this time the tech was kind of quiet, which I thought was interesting because usually they're kind of chatty. And she was real quiet and ran the test and then just excused herself and left the room. And then she brings in a doctor with her, and the doctor starts reviewing the scans. And again, they're not saying a word to me, the panic, the trauma of this whole incident starts to did they find something? He wouldn't answer any of my questions, and he excused himself and brought in a third guy. And when the third guy came into the room, and now they're all reviewing this scan, at that point I was really getting nervous, and I'm like, can you please tell me what you found? And I found out that the third gentleman that they had brought in was the head pediatric cardiologist of the entire Children's University. He introduced himself to me and he says, well, we're just having trouble explaining what we're seeing. And I said, okay. And he said, from where your son was at his last scan to now, we can't even find a trace of any issue. And I remember sitting there and going, holy cow, God did it. Like, he did it. And I remember he was telling me, and he was going on about how Maddex was still gonna have an issue. Like, they had the scans to show the issue, to show the leakage, pretty much telling me.
You can see the scan from where he started to where it was, and where it was minimal to non-existent.
Non-existent.
It's on their chart what it said.
He was saying. And then he ends this conversation, he says, he's still gonna need a heart transplant one day, but don't worry, it'll be on his insurance and not yours. And I remember he thought it was a joke, but to me, I remember I looked right back at him. I said, no, you don't know my God, and you don't know what he did, and you don't know that he healed his heart.
We've always said that Maddex has the heart of God, and that's what we've claimed over his life. And the doctor said that he would never gain weight, and he's gained weight. They said that he would be quiet. If you know my son, he is not quiet. They said that he would never have energy. This kid bounces off the walls. Every single thing the doctor said that he would not be or that he could not do, he is out there being and doing.
They pretty much told us he would forever be in congestive heart failure.
So it's really cool. This month, actually November 17th, he turns 8 years old. He has not had any heart surgery. His heart is healthy, and by doctors' own words, there's no way that this could happen. And so we're just really thankful for all the things that God has done, still does. My son has had 3 attempts on his life before and while he was being born. And I don't know what God has in store for him, but I know it's pretty big. And God has covered him, he's covered our family. And so we're thankful that God is still moving, that miracles still happen, and that our boy is a very healthy boy who's going to turn into a very healthy man, and he's going to do a lot of good things for God.